They say in the Old West, a quiet meal could turn into a war zone faster than a jackrabbit in a hailstorm. And nowhere was that truer than Blazers Mill, New Mexico Territory, on April 4, 1878. This wasn't just another dusty gunfight. This was a side chapter of the bloody Lincoln County War, a feud so tangled it made Hatfields and McCoys look like polite chess partners. Now picture the setting. Blazers Mill sat along the Rio Tularosa, about 20 miles southeast of Lincoln. It was a frontier outpost, a sawmill and trading post built by Dr. Joseph Blazer, a man who'd figured out that lumber and mail contracts could turn a tidy profit if you didn't get shot first. The place had a few cabins, a mill wheel, a stable, and the smell of fresh-cut pine mixed with gun oil. On that warm April morning, the Regulators, a band of deputized ranch hands, gunmen, and outlaws led by Dick Brewer, with Billy the Kid, Charlie Boudreaux, Doc Scurlock, and a few others, rode up to the mill looking for a man named Andrew L. Buckshot Roberts. Now, Buckshot was a former buffalo hunter, and rumor said he'd fought Comanches, outlaws, and hangovers with equal enthusiasm. He was rough, quiet, and carried a Winchester rifle like it was part of his anatomy. He'd been wounded once by a shotgun blast, hence the nickname Buckshot. The Regulators believed Roberts had taken pay from the rival Murphy-Dolan faction, the same crew responsible for killing their boss and friend, John Tunstall. They rode in to arrest him, or maybe just have a conversation, though in Lincoln County, conversation usually meant somebody's getting ventilated. Roberts was sitting down to breakfast when he saw them approach. He didn't run. He calmly loaded his rifle. One of the Regulators, Frank Coe, stepped forward to talk sense into him. Roberts didn't want to fight, but he sure wasn't handing over his guns. Words got sharp, tempers hotter, and when Coe reached for his weapon, the first shot of the gunfight at Blazers Mill rang out. Roberts fired from the hip, boom, hitting John Middleton square in the chest. Middleton fell back, bleeding, but lived. The Regulators scattered like quail. Billy the Kid darted behind the corral and started firing his revolver, bullets snapping through the morning air. Roberts, now inside the mill house, took cover behind the wall and began trading shots with the Regulators. His Winchester barked fire with deadly precision. One round struck Doc Scurlock's hat clean off his head. Another grazed George Coe's right hand so badly it nearly took off a finger. The Regulators poured lead into the building, splintering the wood, but Roberts wasn't done. He kept firing methodically, calm as a preacher at Sunday lunch. Then Dick Brewer, the leader, decided to flank him. Brewer crawled to a pile of logs behind the mill wheel, thinking he had the drop. He peeked out for a shot. And that's when Buckshot squeezed the trigger. The bullet hit Brewer square in the eye, dead before he hit the ground. The gunfight lasted less than 15 minutes, but by the end, it was chaos. Several Regulators wounded, one leader dead, and Roberts himself bleeding from multiple hits. A bullet had torn through his stomach. The Regulators backed off, shocked that one wounded man had practically defeated an entire posse. Roberts staggered inside, propped himself up, and reportedly muttered, "Guess I evened the score." He died the next day. The Regulators buried Brewer in the mill yard. Locals said for weeks afterward, you could still see bullet holes in the sawmill walls and smell the faint tang of gunpowder in the lumber. Now the gunfight at Blazers Mill didn't end the Lincoln County War. It just poured more kerosene on the campfire. Over the next months, the war escalated. Ambushes, raids, and more gunfights that made legends out of men like Billy the Kid. But historians still shake their heads at Buckshot Roberts, the man who didn't want to fight, didn't run, and single-handedly took on the most dangerous gunman in New Mexico. Even Billy the Kid, years later, supposedly said, "Buckshot was the bravest man I ever saw." Today, if you visit the area, near modern Tularosa, close to the Mescalero Apache Reservation, the old mill's long gone. Nature reclaimed the spot, but if you listen closely, locals say on a still morning you can hear the faint clack of a Winchester lever echoing through the canyon. Maybe it's just the wind. Maybe it's Buckshot checking his aim. So that's the twisted tale of the gunfight at Blazers Mill, where one tough old buffalo hunter made history, one bullet at a time. If you enjoyed this story, give us a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel for more Wild West tales. In 1878, New Mexico wasn't a state yet. It was wild, wide open and lawless. Imagine a land where government was a rumor, justice was a sidearm, and mail was carried through Apache country under the protection of whoever had the most bullets. The railroads hadn't fully reached that corner yet. Travel between towns like Lincoln, Fort Stanton, and Blazers Mill meant dusty trails, tough horses, and constant threat of bandits or Apaches. Telegraph lines crackled across the plains, but messages often arrived slower than bullets. The Rio Tularosa Valley, where Blazers Mill stood, was remote. High desert forests, mesas, and creeks winding down from the Sierra Blanca Mountains. It was beautiful country, if you could survive it. At the heart of the Lincoln County War was business rivalry disguised as law enforcement. Two factions fought for control of trade and ranching contracts. Lawrence Murphy and James Dolan, who ran the big general store called the House, had the sheriff, courts, and politicians in their pocket. John Tunstall and Alexander McSween, newcomers backed by English capital, opened a competing store and bank. It wasn't just about goods, it was about control of the territory. Cattle contracts, mail routes, and even army supplies passed through these networks. Whoever controlled them practically owned Lincoln County. When John Tunstall was ambushed and killed on February 18, 1878, it turned business rivalry into open war. His hired hands and friends, including a young William H. Bonney, better known later as Billy the Kid, swore revenge. They became known as the Regulators, deputized under flimsy legal pretenses to hunt down Tunstall's killers. But being a regulator was a death sentence. Lawmen, bounty hunters, and outlaws all blurred together. By April, they were riding across the territory, guns ready and tempers short, which led them right to Blazers Mill and Buckshot Roberts. After Roberts' legendary stand and Dick Brewer's death, the Regulators were shaken. Their leadership was gone, morale shattered, and the enemy, the Murphy-Dolan faction, was regrouping. This gunfight hardened Billy the Kid. It was one of the first times he saw a true one-man stand and learned how fast things could turn. Within weeks, the Regulators went on the offensive again, and by July, Lincoln itself was under siege. The Battle of Lincoln, a 4-day street war fought house to house, right in the middle of town. Here's what life was like around the time. Houses, mostly adobe, with flat roofs and narrow windows, useful for shooting out of. Weapons, Colt 45, Peacemakers, Winchester 1873 rifles, and double-barrel shotguns, the tools of survival. Food, beans, salt pork, and coffee were staples. Luxuries like whiskey or tobacco were traded like gold. Currency, many paid in livestock, hides, or IOUs instead of cash. Law enforcement, half the sheriffs were hired guns, the other half corrupt or outmatched. The area around Blazers Mill was also home to Mescalero Apache people, who had seen their lands taken and their freedom restricted to the nearby reservation. The Blazer family actually had good relations with the Apache and ran the Blazer ferry across the Rio Tularosa to connect travelers and trade routes. So when the Regulators came in with guns blazing, they weren't just disturbing a sawmill. They were lighting up a tense frontier crossroads that already carried layers of resentment, fear, and blood. Thanks for watching, folks. We appreciate you riding along with us. Come back next week for more Wild West stories and adventures.